Today I'm going to show you how to create the second metal in this group of 10 metals I created. This is procedural silver metal. This is 3 textures, the regular version on the left and 2 displaced versions on the right. It's not going to be too complicated. This is what our average end node setup is going to look like, but if you want to just buy it, I'll make it available on my Gumroad and Patreon. So a little bit about silver. Pure silver is nearly white. It's lustrous, so shiny. It's soft, very ductile, so it can be made into wire. It's also malleable, so it can be reshaped without breaking, and it's an excellent conductor. It doesn't oxidize, but it does react with hydrogen sulfide in the air and forms silver tarnish over time. So let's set up our scene. I'm going to shift D this cube to duplicate it, hit X to constrain it. If I hold down Control, it kind of snaps to each place on the grid there. So I'm going to left click when I like the placement there. Let's grab this first cube, hit SZ.1 to size it along the Z axis. Hit N to bring up this panel here, and your dimensions should look like this, 2, 2.2. And hit N again, get rid of that. Come over here to the modifiers and add a bevel modifier. You can see it's not interacting correctly. I didn't apply the scale here, so I'm going to hit Control A and apply that scale. The amount is going to be 0.04 and the segments are going to be 3. Hit W or right click to bring up this context menu and hit Shade Smooth. And this guy's all set up. For the other cube, let's select that and hit Control 4 to add a subdivision surface modifier. You could also come over here to the modifiers panel, but this is just a quicker way to do it. As long as it says 4 in the levels viewport, you can go ahead and apply this with Control A. And then we're going to add a cast modifier, because this is not quite a sphere yet. Come to the factor and hit 1. And then we'll go ahead and apply that to Control A. Then right click or W to bring up that context menu and hit Shade Smooth. And that one's all set up as well. I'm going to bring in a plane here, Shift A, and just move it down a tiny bit, size it up by, I don't know, let's say 10. And then just go into Edit mode, hit 2 to go into Edge Select. Grab the back edge there and hit E and Z to extrude it along the Z axis. I'm going to grab this edge here now and hit Control B, and that allows me to create a bevel here. And if I use the mouse wheel, I can create some more cuts there. This looks pretty good. And tab back into object mode, W or right click to bring up the context menu again and hit Shade Smooth. And then we've got a nice backdrop. I'm going to switch over to the Cycles render engine and just switch to GPU compute. You might not have that option, but if you do, it'll be faster for you. I'm going to get rid of this light because I'm going to bring in some HDRI lighting. Come to the world properties and next to color, where this yellow circle is, just click on that yellow circle. Then go to environment texture. Go to open, and then you just need to find some HDRIs. If you don't have any, check out HDRIhaven.com. There's a lot of free ones there. I'm going to use Kaylee Interior. I've got a lot of 4K ones. I don't really need 4K. Probably don't need more than 1K. It just takes up more room. So let's go ahead and use that. And now we've got some nice lighting there. If we go into rendered mode, we should see it in the background. Let's switch this top right area up here to the 3D viewport. You can do Shift F5 and it just switches it there. Then this middle area, if you do Shift F3, it cycles between a couple ones. If you do it a couple times, it switches to the shader editor there. I'm going to hit N, get rid of this shelf here, and both our objects should have the same material. Let's just rename it Silver Metal. And now we're ready to start on our texture here. I'll just make this a bit bigger as well. And hold down Z and move your mouse up to go into rendered mode. So let's just move this principled BSDF out of the way for now. And I'm going to bring in a texture coordinate node. Just place it right here to make sure things are coming out of object. I'm going to bring in a noise texture and a mix RGB. This is going to be set up fairly similar to iron if you've already checked that one out. So you're going to see a lot of similarities here. Plug object into color 2 of that mix RGB. We'll set this scale at 0.6 and leave everything else the same on that noise. For the mix, we'll go to 0.9. There we go. I'm going to bring in a mapping node, place it right here, then a Musgrave node, place it right afterwards, and a color ramp, place it right here. This color ramp, I'm going to bring the white down to 0.8, and for the Musgrave, I'm going to set up some basic settings that are pretty much the same for all the duplicates I'm going to make. The scale is going to be 6.5. The the detail is going to be 9.3, and the dimension is going to be 0.1, and we'll leave the linearity at 2. We can see this interesting gritty texture right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these 3 nodes, the mapping, Musgrave, and color ramp, and I'm going to duplicate them 4 times. So we have 5 different strands there. And I duplicate them by leaving them attached with Control-Shift-D. So just 2 more times. There we go. And I'll move this down a little bit here so you can see what's going on a bit better. If you want to make a reroute, shift and right-click and drag through some existing node noodles there. Makes a little reroute point. Let's go to the middle strand here, and I'm just going to change the scale on this Musgrave to 1. And that's the only Musgrave we're going to touch. The rest of them are going to remain the same, so that's just something we can do at the beginning there. Let's come up to the top now, and this mapping node, we're looking at this right now. I'm going to change the X scale to 0.5. We can see it stretches our texture along the X-axis. I'm going to come to this color ramp now, and this black color, we're going to change the value of this here. We're going to change it to 0.4 gray. So now we can see it's a little lighter. The reason I made it lighter is because I'm going to mix all these together, and if I have them too dark, my end result is really dark. So I need to keep them a little light. So we're done that first strand. Let's come to the second strand now. For this mapping node, we're going to come to the Y location info and put 0.2 in there. Then come down to the X scale, and this time we're going to multiply this by 2. Let's just see what that's doing. It's just stretching it the other way this time, along the Y-axis. Then we'll come to this color ramp and change this black value to 0.45. Now we're done that second strand. Looking at the third strand, let's start by adjusting the Y value. We'll put this at 0.4, and then the X, we'll put this at 0.2. So, because this scale is smaller on the Musgrave, we get a bigger texture here. And this X stretching here, we can see that along the X-axis. Let's come to the black value on the color ramp. We'll just change this to 0.3. Looking at the fourth strand now, let's come to the Y location and add 0.6 there. And then for the scale under the X, let's change that to 4. Let's come to the black value on the color ramp. We'll change this to 0.8. So this is a lighter texture. It's going to have less influence overall on the resulting end texture there. Looking at the fifth and final strand here, let's start with the mapping data. We'll change X to 0.1 and Y to 0.7. Then we'll come down to the X scale. We'll change this to 6.8. And then we'll come to the black value on the color ramp. We'll change this to 0.6. And there we go. We finished all these strands. We can mix them together. To do that, we're going to use a really quick Node Wrangler shortcut. You just hold down Control and Shift, and then you right-click and drag from one of these nodes to the other. Then you open it up and change it to multiply, and just drag it across to 1, and they're both mixed together. You can see already it's kind of a cool, gritty, overlaid texture. We're going to keep doing that. Grab this multiply here, and we'll just, you don't really need to worry about the order. You can do it from this color ramp to the multiply, or vice versa. But it creates this mix. Open it up, change it to multiply, we'll change it to 1. Let's do that again with this guy here. Open it up, change it to multiply, drag it across to 1. Then we'll do it one final time. Open it up, change it to multiply, and drag it across to 1. You can see this is kind of dark here. I'm just going to move them over here a little bit. Let's add a color ramp right after here. Place it here. Then we'll drag the white down to 0.2. I was pretty happy with that value. Then let's bring in a color ramp. Place it right afterwards. We'll move this up because we're just going to duplicate it 3 times. Let's duplicate it with Control-Shift-D so it stays attached to that other color ramp. And this is going to be the basis for our metal texture. The top one's going to be the color. Second one's going to be the metallicness. Third one's going to be the roughness. And the fourth one is going to be the bump. Let's grab that principled BSDF that we've been ignoring and just bring it over here. We'll just plug this top one into the color for now. We won't worry about it too much. This one's going to go into the roughness. No, pardon me, the metallic. This one here goes into the roughness. And this one here is going to go into the normal. But first we're going to bring in a bump node. So just plug this color into the height. And then we'll plug the normal into the normal. For the normal, let's bring this black up to 0.64. We'll just change this value to 0.55 gray. Then for this bump here, this bump node, let's change the strength to 0.8. I found that worked pretty well. For this roughness here, let's go ahead, do a similar thing with this black position and change it to 0.64. And we're going to do actually the same exact thing with the value too. Change this to 0.55. For this color ramp going into the metallic input, let's change this black to 0.9, and this white is going to go to 0.7. Let's take a look at this here. We can see we've got some white in most of the areas, and then black in some of the areas. That means white is equal to 1, so it's going to be one metallic or a metallic substance. So most of this is going to be metallic, and very little of it, these areas here, these are non-metallic. For the actual color here with this color ramp, let's split this screen and change the top area to our image editor. I've got an image of silver here that I downloaded from Google there. So I just dragged it in and just dropped it there. And then we can come to this color ramp, and over top of the sliders here, if we hit E, we can sample with this eyedropper as many points as we want. It only creates 30 points overall and then kind of deletes the old ones. But you can do this a couple times and see if you can get a good result that you're happy with here. I'm going to try and get a mix of the light and dark ones there. Let's try it one more time. That looks good. I'm happy with that. Something to keep in mind is that these non-metallic areas, what I'm thinking is probably silver tarnish, is controlled by these top few points here. Because, you know, the stuff that's going in here, the white stuff, which is consequently the non-metallic stuff through this one here, is basically the top of that color ramp. So if you wanted to change those colors, just delete a couple of those there, add in a new point, and just change this color to, whatever you want. Maybe it's green, maybe it's olive, maybe it's brown or whatever. I've seen Tarnish take a couple different colors, so I think you can be a little creative with that, as long as you don't push it too far. I noticed in some pictures too that the reflections on the outer edges of the silver was often quite dark. So I thought I would try and mimic that with a layer weight node and a color ramp. I'm just going to bring this in and hit Control Shift left click to come out of facing there. I'm bringing a color ramp, and I'm going to put the black up at 0.9, actually 0.8. See that? And bring the white down to 0.1. We can see it's mostly white and gray in the middle, and then a little thin black outline on the edge of that sphere. Then I'm going to bring in a hue saturation node, place it right here after the color ramp, and just Control Shift D this. And then I'm going to hold down Control Shift and right click from one of these to the other and create a mix between them. And then feed this color from that color ramp into the factor here. What that does is it allows me to control the top value here, bring it down, and basically make the outer edge just slightly darker than it would have been otherwise. I can keep going if I want and make this stand out even more, but I found like 0.5 was pretty good there. It tended to look a little bit more realistic. Next, I'm going to close up this window here, and I'm going to grab both of these objects in my 3D viewport and just hit Shift D and move them along the Y-axis by hitting Y and hold down Control, and they'll snap. I'll just left click when I'm happy with the placement there. I'm going to click on the sphere and create a new material with this icon right here, and we'll call it Silver Metal Displaced. I'm going to click on the crushed cube here. We'll go to the Silver Metal Displaced, but we'll change it so this is a new material as well. We'll just call this Silver Metal Displaced 2. Start with this sphere here. I'm just going to zoom in, and one thing we need to do is just make sure that under the material properties, bump only is changed to displacement and bump, so we actually get some displacement happening here. And so what I did is I brought in a texture coordinate node. Let's make sure this is coming out of object. I'm going to bring in a few noise textures here. I'll bring in one, then put one afterwards, and then I'll click on this first one and hit Control Shift D. Oops, not the texture coordinate node. This noise texture. Control Shift D, then it duplicates it while leaving it attached. This first noise texture, I'm going to change the scale to 10, and the detail is going to go to 3. This second one up here, I'm going to change to 1 for the scale. I'm also going to change the roughness to 1. And for this one down here, I'm going to change the scale to 0.7 and the roughness to 1. I'm going to bring in a mix RGB and place it right between these two noise textures on the top and run object into color 2 on this guy right here. This factor is going to be set at 0.6. And then I'm going to bring in a color ramp and put it after both of these noise textures right here. This guy and this guy here. I'm going to change this color ramp down here. The black is going to come up to 0.5. And this one right here, we'll leave it at 1, but we'll change the value to a 0.8 gray. So it's not, oops, it's not quite as dark. I think I screwed that up. Yeah, 0.8 gray right there. And then this top color ramp here, we'll bring the black up to 0.2. And this one we'll bring down, we'll leave it at 1, but we'll bring it down to 0.8 gray as well. Just the value adjustment there. I'm going to bring in a displacement node so we can kind of see what's happening, but we're not going to be able to tell too much until we add a few math nodes in here. For instance, if we put this in here and then plug this into displacement, we can see we get this interesting shape here. That's this lower branch here, and this upper branch is creating this kind of texture here. So we're going to add these two together with varying levels of influence, just with a math node. I'll place it right here, and we'll just plug the bottom one into there. I want a bit less of this top branch here, so I'm going to duplicate this add node, change this to multiply, and I'm going to change this to 0.2, so it has a bit less. There's these weird artifacts right here that are being caused by the interpolation of this color ramp down here, so I'm going to ease it off with this B-spline here. Just makes it look a little smoother there. If we zoom out, we can see that this is now quite small. So let's change the mid-level to 0.2 there to make it a little larger. Why don't we duplicate this and multiply? Just change this to 1. That way it's the same. But if we wanted to, we could like change it to 2 or 3 or whatever, and make it a bit more influenced by this bottom texture here. We're going to be adding some dents to this flattened cube here, and I've got kind of a standard way that I've been doing that lately. Let's start by coming down in the material properties to under settings where it says displacement. Let's change that from bump only to displacement and bump. I'm going to come here and bring in a texture coordinate node. Just place it right here and make sure it's coming out of object. I'm going to bring in a noise texture, place it right here. Let's change the scale to 2, and the detail is going to be 5. I'm going to duplicate this with Control-Shift-D so that it remains attached to this texture coordinate node. I'm going to change this to 4D. Leave the W at 0. We'll change the scale, actually we'll leave it at 2 rather, and change the detail to 2.5. Then I'm going to make sure that this is coming out of factor going into a color ramp. So I'm just going to swap that here and do the same thing with this bottom noise texture. I'm going to mix these two together by holding down Control and Shift and right-clicking and dragging from one node to the other. I'm going to put that top color ramp into the factor. The bottom one's going to go into color 1. I'm going to change this to a 0.76 gray. That doesn't matter too much. It's just kind of affect the displacement, how it works with these dents. And this top area is kind of a mask to show you exactly where the dents will go. And this bottom one is to control the detail in the dents. So for this top color ramp, let's set the white to actually I put the black there. Let's grab the white, put it to 0.51. Let's grab the black. We'll put that at 0.7, and then we'll change it to a 0.75 gray, so it's much closer to white. This guy here, the bottom color ramp, let's take that black and change that to 0.27, and we'll leave the white at 1. Then let's bring in a displacement node and place it right after this mix here. We'll just need to plug this into the height instead. Then let's run this into the displacement. We should see some displacement here. Let's just zoom in and see what that looks like. It's just taking chunks out of our mesh there. If we go to the modifiers panel, we see we've got our bevel still. Let's get rid of that and bring in a subdivision surface modifier. That's going to actually allow us to see some detail in these dents here. I'm going to bring this up to maybe 0.4 or something like that. Looks pretty good. So if we wanted the whole flat area on top to be kind of dented, kind of like the iron was, we could come here to this first slider on the color ramp and just change this to, maybe 0.98 or something like that. Maybe a bit further down. Yeah, you can see how it's getting really bumpy there. I'm just going to leave that at 1, just as a stylistic choice. And you can see the detail in here. You can turn that up, maybe put this to like 3, or even 4. Or you could change the scale right here. See how this affects it. A lot of different choices you could make here that affect that final outcome. So make sure you play around with all this stuff and just see exactly what it's doing. Another big thing on all of these textures is this color ramp right here. If you want less surface imperfections, let's take a look at this silver metal that we created here without any displacement. And if we move both of these sliders to the right, we get much less surface imperfections, much cleaner there. And if we wanted shinier, we could come over to the color ramp that's controlling the roughness and maybe turn this down a little bit. So we get some values closer to 0. Stuff is much shinier. So if we wanted like shinier, but still a lot of surface imperfections, maybe we could go something like this here, That looks pretty interesting. So that's it for this tutorial. Hope you could see what I was doing and how you might play around with it. If you have any questions or you're confused by anything, just let me know in the comments, or you can hop on my Discord and ask me a specific question if you want. Thanks for watching. See ya.